Emma worked quietly in the old community center, sorting through boxes of donated items. At 28, she had found peace in this simple job, organizing memories that others had left behind. The work was simple but meaningful. Every day, people brought boxes filled with their past, old clothes, books, pictures, and treasures they no longer needed. Emma carefully went through each item, deciding what could help others and what should be thrown away. On a grey Tuesday morning, she discovered something unusual. The rain tapped gently against the windows as Emma opened a heavy cardboard box. Inside were old books with yellowed pages, some broken picture frames, and a few dusty ornaments. Hidden between two thick novels, she found a black and white photograph. Emma pulled it out carefully. The photograph was old, maybe from many years ago. It showed people celebrating in what looked like a large hall or community building. She could see their joyful poses clearly. Children were being lifted high in the air by adults. People had their arms round each other, embracing with happiness. Some had their hands raised up, as if they were cheering or dancing. The scene looked wonderful and full of life. But something was terribly wrong. Every single face had been carefully scratched out. Emma held the photograph up to the light from the window. The scratches were not random or accidental. Someone had used a sharp object, maybe a knife or nail, to deliberately remove each face. They had been very careful. The scratches only covered the faces, leaving everything else perfectly untouched. The bodies, the clothes, the background, even the hands and arms were all clear and undamaged. The mystery troubled Emma deeply. Why would someone do this? Who were these people? What celebration was this? The questions filled her mind as she stared at the strange photograph. "What's that you found?" asked her colleague James, walking over to her desk. James was a friendly man in his 50s who had worked at the community center for many years. Emma showed him the photograph. "Look at this. Someone scratched out all the faces. Isn't that strange?" James looked at it for a moment and shrugged. "Just throw it away. It's damaged goods. We can't use broken pictures for anything." But Emma couldn't let it go. Something about those faceless figures called to her. Even without faces, she could feel the joy and happiness in their poses. The way they held each other, the way the children were lifted up with such care, the way people stood close together. It all spoke of love and celebration. These people had been truly happy in this moment, and now their faces were gone forever. "I don't know," Emma said slowly. "Maybe someone would want this. Maybe it belongs to a family somewhere." James shook his head. "Emma, you spend too much time thinking about these old things. It's just a damaged photograph. Nobody wants a picture with no faces." But Emma wasn't convinced. As she continued her work that day, her eyes kept going back to the mysterious photograph. The faceless figures seemed to be reaching across time, asking her to remember them, to find their story. She felt a strange connection to them, as if they were trying to tell her something important. When her workday ended, Emma made an unusual decision. Instead of leaving the photograph at the community center, she carefully placed it in her bag and took it home. Her small apartment was quiet and cozy. Emma lived alone, and she usually enjoyed the peaceful evenings after work. She would make herself dinner, read a book, or watch television. But tonight was different. She placed the photograph on her kitchen table under the warm light. Then she sat down and stared at it for hours. The longer she looked, the more questions filled her mind. Who were these people? When was this photograph taken? Where was this celebration happening? Why had their faces been erased? Was it done in anger? Was it done to hide their identities? Was someone trying to protect them or hurt them? Emma made herself a cup of tea and continued studying the photograph. She noticed small details she had missed before. The clothes people were wearing looked like they were from many years ago. Maybe the 1950s or 1960s. The building in the background had high ceilings and tall windows. Some people were holding what looked like flowers or small gifts in one corner. She could see part of a banner hanging from the ceiling, but the words were too unclear to read. The more she looked, the more she felt connected to these mysterious people. Their joy was so clear, even without faces. Whatever they were celebrating must have been very special and important to them. The fact that someone had taken such care to scratch out only the faces made the mystery even. Deeper as the evening grew late, Emma made a decision that would change everything. She would not throw this photograph away like James suggested. She would not ignore it or forget about it. Instead, she would find out who these people were. She would solve this mystery and discover the story behind the faceless celebration. Emma didn't know how long it would take or where to begin, but she felt determined. These people deserved to be remembered. Their story deserved to be told. And somehow, Emma knew that finding their story might help her understand something important about herself too. She carefully placed the photograph in a safe place and went to bed. Already planning how she would begin her search tomorrow, Emma began her search the next morning. She woke up early, feeling excited and nervous about her mission. The mysterious photograph was the first thing she thought about when she opened her eyes. She had breakfast quickly and decided to start at the local library. The library was a large, old building in the center of town. Emma had visited it many times before, but today felt different. She was not here to borrow books for pleasure. She was here as a detective, trying to solve a mystery that had kept her awake most of the night. She walked straight to the main desk where Mrs. Patterson worked. Mrs. Patterson was the head librarian, a kind woman with grey hair and gentle eyes. She had worked at this library for 40 years and knew almost everyone in town. If anyone could help Emma, it would be Mrs. Patterson. "Good morning, Mrs. Patterson," Emma said politely. "I wonder if you could help me with something unusual." Double quotes. Mrs. Patterson looked up from her computer and smiled. "Of course, dear. What can I do for you?" Emma carefully took out the photograph and placed it on the desk. Mrs. Patterson put on her reading glasses and looked at it closely. Her eyebrows went up with surprise when she saw the scratched-out faces. "Oh my goodness," Mrs. Patterson said softly. "What happened to this poor photograph? That's what I'm trying to find out." Emma explained. "I found it yesterday at the community center. Someone donated it, but all the faces have been scratched out. I'm hoping to learn who these people are and why this happened." Mrs. Patterson studied the photograph for several minutes. She looked at the background, the clothes, and the way people were standing. Finally, she pointed to the building behind the celebrating people. "The background looks familiar," Mrs. Patterson said, adjusting her glasses again. "That might be the old community hall. It was torn down in the 1980s. I remember it well. Many important events happened there over the years." This small clue gave them a hope. Her heart beat fast with excitement. Finally, she had something to work with. "Do you remember what kinds of events happened there?" "Oh, all sorts of things," Mrs. Patterson replied. "Wedding receptions, birthday parties, community meetings, holiday celebrations. It was the heart of our town for many decades." Emma thanked Mrs. Patterson and left the library feeling much more hopeful. She had her first real clue. The photograph was taken at the old community hall. Now she needed to find people who might remember events that happened there, especially in the time period when this photograph seemed to be taken. She decided to use her lunch breaks at work to continue the investigation every day that week. Instead of eating lunch at the community center, Emma walked through the older neighborhoods of the town. These areas had houses that were built many years ago, and older people often lived there. She hoped some of them might remember the community hall and recognize the photograph. Emma knocked on doors and stopped people walking on the sidewalks. She was always polite and explained her mission clearly. Most people were curious about the strange photograph with the scratched-out faces, but they couldn't help her. "I'm sorry, dear, but I don't recognize this," said one elderly woman. "This looks very old. I wasn't living here at that time," said another person. "The faces are gone. So it's hard to tell who these people might be," explained a man who looked at the photograph for a long time. Most people shook their heads politely. Some looked sad when they saw the damaged faces. Others seemed curious but couldn't provide any information. By Thursday evening, Emma was starting to feel discouraged. Maybe this mystery would never be solved. Maybe James was right, and she should just throw the photograph away. But on Friday afternoon, everything changed. Emma was walking down Elm Street, one of the oldest streets in town. The houses there were small and neat, with front porches where people often sat in good weather. She noticed an elderly man sitting on his porch, reading a newspaper. Emma took a deep breath and walked up to his front gate. "Excuse me, sir. I'm sorry to bother you, but I wonder if you could help me with something." The man looked up from his newspaper. He was probably around 80 years old, with white hair and kind eyes. He wore a comfortable sweater and seemed happy to have company. "Of course. Young lady, what can I do for you?" Emma showed him the photograph. "I found this at the community center where I work. All the faces have been scratched out, and I'm trying to find out who these people and what happened." The elderly man took the photograph in his hands. As soon as he looked at it, his expression changed completely. His eyes went wide with surprise, and his hands began to shake slightly. "Oh my," he whispered, his voice full of emotion. "I haven't seen this in so many years." Emma's heart raced with excitement. Finally, she had found someone who recognized the photograph. "You know this photograph?" The man nodded slowly, still staring at the image. "My name is Albert Thompson. This photograph brings back so many memories." Emma sat down on the porch steps, eager to hear what Albert could tell her. "Please, can you tell me about it?" Albert looked up at her with eyes that seemed to hold decades of memories. "This was taken in 1963, at the old community hall. It was our first celebration together. People from all backgrounds, all colors, all faiths. We had never done anything like it before in our town." Emma felt chills run down her arms. Finally, she was getting answers. "It looks like such a happy celebration." "It was," Albert said softly. "It was beautiful and hopeful, but also very brave." "But why are the faces scratched out?" Emma asked gently. Albert's eyes grew sad, and he was quiet for a moment before answering. "Those were dangerous times, my dear. Being seen at such a gathering could have cost people their jobs, their safety, even their homes. Someone scratched out the faces to protect everyone in the picture." Albert looked at Emma with gentle eyes and smiled. "Would you like to come inside for some tea? I have many more stories to tell you about this photograph." "And it's getting a bit cold out here on the porch." Emma nodded eagerly. She was so excited to learn more about the mystery that had been keeping her awake at night. Albert stood up slowly, using his walking cane for support, and led her through the front door of his small house. Emma was amazed by what she saw inside. Albert's living room was like a museum of memories. The walls were covered with old photographs from different time periods. There were pictures of families, children playing, people at work, and celebrations from many decades ago on the Montelbys. Above the fireplace were more photographs in beautiful frames. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with old books and photo albums. "Please, sit down and make yourself comfortable," Albert said, pointing to a soft armchair. "I'll make us some tea." While Albert was in the kitchen, Emma looked round the room with wonder. She could see the history of the town in these photographs. Some were in color, some in black and white. Some looked very old and some more recent. It was like looking at the story of many people's lives all at once. Albert returned with a tea tray and 2 steaming cups. He sat down in the chair across from Emma and handed her the tea. The warm cup felt good in her hands. "Now," Albert said, settling into his chair, "let me tell you the real story behind that photograph you found." Emma leaned forward, eager to hear every word. "The woman who organized that celebration was named Rose," Albert explained. "Rose Thompson. She was a teacher at the local school for many years. She was very brave, very kind. And she had a big heart. Rose believed that people should come together despite their differences. She thought that skin color, religion, or where someone came from should not keep people apart." Emma listened carefully as Albert continued. His voice was soft but full of emotion as he remembered Rose. "In 1963, our town was very different from today. People from different backgrounds didn't usually mix together. There were rules, spoken and unspoken, that kept people separated. But Rose didn't think this was right. She wanted to change things, even though it was dangerous to try." Albert took a sip of his tea and looked out the window for a moment, as if he was seeing the past in his mind. Rose planned this celebration in secret. She invited people from all parts of our community, black families, white families, people from different churches, people who spoke different languages at home. She wanted everyone to come together and celebrate just being human. It was the first time anything like this had ever happened in our town. Emma could imagine how exciting and scary that must have been. What was the celebration for? It was meant to celebrate the end of summer, Albert replied. But really, it was about celebrating friendship and understanding. Rose made sure there was food that everyone would enjoy, music that everyone could dance to, and activities for the children. For one beautiful evening, people forgot about their differences and just enjoyed being together. Albert's eyes grew sadder as he continued the story. But after the celebration, tensions grew in our town. Some people were very angry that the celebration had happened. They thought it was wrong for different groups of people to come together. Like that, Rose became worried about the people in the photograph. She was afraid they might get in trouble if anyone could identify them. Emma felt her heart racing. So Rose scratched out the faces herself. Yes, Albert nodded. Rose scratched out the faces herself to keep them safe. It broke her heart to do it, but she wanted to protect everyone who had been brave enough to come to her celebration. But she kept the picture because she said someday things would be different. Emma was amazed by this story. She had thought the scratched faces were done in anger or hate, but now she understood that they were done out of love and protection. Rose had destroyed the faces to save the people. What happened to Rose after that? Emma asked softly. Albert's expression became very sad. Rose continued teaching and trying to bring people together, but more quietly. She never gave up hope that things would change. She lived a long life, helping many students and always believing in the goodness of people. Albert was quiet for a moment before continuing. She passed away 10 years ago. She was 92 years old. But before she died, she gave the photograph to the community center. She told the director that she hoped one day someone would find it and understand what it meant. Emma felt tears forming in her eyes. Rose had been protecting these people, Even as she preserved their memory, the scratched faces weren't about anger or hate. They were about love and protection. Rose had sacrificed the beauty of the photograph to keep the people in it safe. Rose always said something that stayed with me, Albert added, his voice becoming stronger. She said that the faces would return when the time was right. When people were ready to see past their differences again. When it was safe to celebrate, together without fear. Emma wiped away a tear and looked at the mysterious photograph again. Now it looked completely different to her. It wasn't a damaged picture anymore. It was a symbol of hope, protection, and love. Albert smiled at her. I think Rose knew that someday, someone like you would find this photograph. Someone who would care enough to learn its story and understand its meaning. Emma knew what she had to do. She would help Rose's dream come true. She would find a way to honor the memory of that brave celebration and the woman who had organized it. Emma left Albert's house that day with a new purpose burning in her heart. The story of Rose and the brave people in the photograph had changed everything for her. She knew she couldn't just keep this amazing story to herself. She had to do something to honor Rose's memory and make her dream come true. Emma spent the next month planning something very special. Every evening after work, she sat at her kitchen table making lists, writing letters, and thinking of ways to bring the community together. She wanted to create something that would make Rose proud, something that would show that her hope had not been forgotten. With Albert's help, she began reaching out to families throughout the community. Albert knew many people in town, and he was excited to help Emma with her plan. Together, they visited neighbors, called old friends, and shared Rose's story with anyone who would listen. They told people about the mysterious photograph, about the celebration in 1963, and about the teacher who had been brave enough to bring different people together. The response amazed Emma completely. She had worried that people might not care about something that happened so long ago. She thought some people might be too busy with their own lives to get involved. But she was wonderfully wrong. People from all walks of life wanted to help. They offered their time, their skills, and their hearts to Emma's project. Young mothers said they would bring food. Teenagers volunteered to help set up decorations. Elderly people shared their own memories of Rose and offered to help in any way they could. Mrs. Patterson from the library became one of Emma's biggest helpers. She spent hours researching family histories, trying to find relatives of people who might have been at the original celebration in 1963. She looked through old records and talked to long-time residents, gathering stories and connections. Even James from work, who had initially dismissed the photograph as worthless, became one of Emma's strongest supporters. When Emma told him the real story behind the scratched faces, he felt bad about suggesting she throw it away. Emma, I'm sorry I didn't understand before, James said one day at work. This is really important. What can I do to help? James used his contacts throughout the town to spread word about Emma's project. He talked to people at the grocery store, at church, at the post office. Soon, it seemed like everyone in town had heard about Rose and the mysterious photograph. One afternoon, Mary, who owned a small flower shop downtown, came to visit Emma at the community center. Mary was a cheerful woman in her 50s who had lived in the town her whole life. I've been thinking about your story, Mary said to Emma. We should have a celebration, just like the one in the photograph. But this time, we won't need to hide anyone's face. Emma's eyes lit up with excitement. That was exactly what she had been hoping someone would suggest. Do you really think people would come to something like that? I think people are hungry for this kind of connection, Mary replied. In today's world, We spend so much time looking at screens and staying in our own little bubbles. Maybe it's time to come together like Rose wanted us to. Emma approached the director of the community center with the idea. The director, Mrs. Johnson, was an older woman who had known Rose personally years ago. Rose would love this. Mrs. Johnson said with tears in her eyes, "Of course, we can host the event here. This is exactly the kind of thing the community center should be doing." Emma created beautiful flyers telling Rose's story and inviting everyone in the community to come together for an evening of celebration. She posted them in the library, in shops, at churches, and on community bulletin boards. The flyers explained about the photograph, about Rose's courage, and about the dream of bringing people together as the day of the celebration approached. Emma felt nervous and excited at the same time. She had worked so hard on this project, and so many people had helped her. But what if only a few people came? What if the event failed? What if she had built up everyone's hopes for nothing? Emma spent the morning of the celebration setting up the community center with dozens of volunteers. They hung decorations, ranged tables and chairs, and prepared food that had been donated by families from all over town. Albert arrived early, dressed in his best suit and carrying a bouquet of flowers to place near a special display of the photograph. As the afternoon turned to evening, Emma stood nervously by the front door, watching for people to arrive. Her heart was beating fast, and her hands were shaking slightly. But as 6 o'clock approached, Emma's fears melted away completely. People began arriving in small groups, then larger crowds. Families walked in together. Elderly couples came arm in arm. Teenagers arrived with their friends, and children ran excitedly to see the decorations. Hundreds of people filled the community center, young and old, from every background imaginable. They came to honor Rose's memory and the courage of those faceless figures from 1963. The room burst with conversation and laughter as people met. Their neighbors shared stories and celebrated together. Albert, now the guest of honor, stood before the crowd with tears of joy in his eyes. His voice shook with emotion as he spoke to the gathered community. "Rose would be so proud," he said, looking out at all the faces filled with happiness. "She always believed this day would come. She always said that people are good at heart, and tonight, I can see she was right." Emma looked round the room and realized something beautiful. The faces that had been erased from the old photograph were now replaced by new faces, filled with the same joy and hope that Rose had dreamed of so many years ago. The celebration was everything Rose had dreamed of and so much more. Emma moved through the crowded community center, watching magic happen all round her. She saw strangers shaking hands and introducing themselves to each other. She watched children from different families playing together while their parents talked and laughed. She noticed elderly people sharing stories with young adults who listened with genuine interest. Emma observed as barriers that had existed for years seemed to fall away in just one evening. People who had lived in the same town for decades but had never really talked were now discovering they had so much in common. A retired factory worker was deep in conversation with a young college student. A grandmother was showing photos of her grandchildren to a newly married couple. Teenagers were helping elderly guests find seats and bringing them plates of food. The spirit of that long-ago gathering from 1963 had truly come alive again. Emma could feel the same joy and hope that must have filled the original celebration that Rose had organized. But this time, there was no fear. This time, people could show their faces proudly and celebrate their differences as well as their similarities. Emma had created a special display near the entrance of the community center. On a large table covered with a white cloth, she had placed both the original scratched photograph and many new pictures from tonight's celebration. A local photographer had volunteered to take pictures throughout the evening, capturing the smiles and happiness of everyone who attended. The contrast between the old and new photographs was powerful and moving. The original photograph showed the protected faces of the past, people who had been brave enough to come together, but had to hide their identities to stay safe. Right next to it were the new pictures showing the proud, open faces of the present, people who could celebrate together without fear. Many guests stopped to look at the display throughout the evening. Some people cried when they understood the full story. Others smiled with joy when they saw how Rose's dream had finally come true. Children asked their parents to explain why the faces in the old photograph were scratched out. And parents used the opportunity to teach their children about the importance of treating all people with kindness and respect. As the evening wound down and people began to say their goodbyes, Emma stood quietly in front of the display. She felt tired but deeply happy. The months of planning and hard work had been worth every moment. She had helped bring Rose's dream to life, and she had brought her community together in a way that hadn't happened in many years. Albert approached her, walking slowly with his cane, but with a huge smile on his face. His eyes were bright with joy and satisfaction. "You know, Emma," Albert said, his voice warm and full of affection, "I think you understand something very important now." Emma looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" Albert gestured toward the display of photographs. "Sometimes the most beautiful pictures are the ones that take decades to develop. Rose planted a seed of hope 60 years ago. Tonight, we finally got to see it bloom into a beautiful flower." Emma nodded slowly, finally understanding her own journey in a way she never had before. She had been drawn to the mysterious photograph not just because of its mystery, but because she needed to learn important lessons about courage, about community, and about the power of bringing people together. Over the past few months, Emma had discovered things about herself that she never knew existed. She had found courage she didn't know she had. She had learned to reach out to strangers and ask for help. She had discovered the joy that comes from working towards something bigger than herself. The faceless photograph had taught her that some stories are much bigger than any one person. They belong to all of us, connecting us across time and reminding us of our shared humanity. Rose's story wasn't just about one brave teacher from long ago. It was about the ongoing human desire to connect, to understand each other, and to build bridges instead of walls. Emma realized that everyone who came to tonight's celebration was now part of Rose's story. They were all connected to those faceless figures from 1963. And they were all helping to write the next chapter of the story. As the last guests left the community center and Emma helped clean up, she felt a deep sense of peace and accomplishment. She had started this journey someone who simply sorted through donated items at her job. But she was ending it as someone who had helped heal her community and honor the memory of a remarkable woman. Months later, Emma still worked at the community center, but her job felt different now. She approached each donated item with more curiosity and respect, wondering what stories might be hidden in old photographs, letters, or personal belongings. Rose's photograph now hung proudly on the wall of the community center, not hidden away in a box but celebrated and honored. Emma had it professionally framed, and under it was a beautiful brass plaque that read, "In memory of Rose Thompson and all who dared to bring people together." The celebration had become an annual tradition. Every year, the community came together to remember Rose's courage and to celebrate their connections with each other. New people moved to town and joined the tradition. Children who attended the first celebration grew up and brought their own children. Emma had learned the most important lesson of her life. The most important faces in any photograph are not always the ones you can see clearly. but the ones you help create through love, courage, and hope. Every act of kindness, every effort to build understanding, every moment of bringing people together creates new faces of hope for the future. Rosa's dream lived on, not just in the photograph, but in the hearts and actions of everyone who believed in the power of community and human connection.